Hi class, I'm here today to discuss a little bit more about democratization. Now, it may seem from the book or from what you've studied in the past that democratization is a one-way street. That is, you go from authoritarian governments to democracy and that's it. That concept was most famously noted by Francis Fukuyama in The End of History. Everyone's just going to, it might be a bumpy ride, but everyone's going to go towards democracy. Well, we see that in general that trend has been occurring in the developing world. Take, for example, if we do a cross-national analysis of Africa. However, that bumpy road also can go in reverse. So on the positive side, you have countries like Senegal. Senegal was ruled by two authoritarian leaders who were admittedly benevolent leaders, but nonetheless non-elected. Then finally, around the year 2000, they did have actual elections that were competitive and fair. And since that time, they have had additional ones that have cemented a democracy that is functioning under the rule of law, meaning all the parties are equal under the election rules, and no one's playing favorites. On the other side, we have countries like Egypt. Arab Spring brings democracy, right? And the Muslim Brotherhood is legitimately elected. However, within just months of their rise to power, the government is taken over by the military, and the military now holds control through an authoritarian regime. So there you have an authoritarian government leading to a democracy, which then falls back into authoritarianism. So that's what I mean by that reverse. You really see the challenges there. Now let's bring in the two case study countries for Africa and see where they fall in this cross-national analysis. The first one's Nigeria. Now Nigeria really was very much oligarchical, meaning that a small group of people, some elites in both the north and south of the country, came together and essentially hand chose the president of the country for many years. That is, of course, when there weren't coups that got in the way. So it was a fairly poorly functioning democracy, or excuse me, poorly functioning government, and not really a democracy. It is now at least a delegative democracy, meaning they actually hold elections, but how fair they are is still questionable. Still that elite, that small oligarchy of people from the north and south continue to play a major role in who gets elected. In Zimbabwe, we see something that's even less democratic. While Mugabe was, and still is among many people, a legitimate leader, the problem there is that there's not really rule of law, but rule by law, meaning Mugabe, as the leader, decides the rules in which everyone must follow except for himself. And so as a result, the idea of competitive, fair elections has not happened. Now, you may be aware that he has been forced in recent years to rule the country with another party's leader. Now, this was mostly due to large-scale push from outside of his country by organizations like the United Nations. And from what I hear on the ground, while it has reduced inflation and thus the economic livelihood of the people who live there, it has not really led to any true democracy or change. That may well have to wait until after Mugabe passes away. And given his age, that may not be too long of a time period. All right. So again, to go over, generally the trend in Africa has been towards democracy, but by no ways is it a certainty in any of these countries. It is only where institutions and the rule of law are present that true democracy is forming and taking hold on what seems like a permanent basis. One way to remember this is the idea of, do parties in the country believe that if they lose this election, there will be another election that they can win to follow? If so, that is a true deep democracy. If not, it's either a delegative democracy or an authoritarian regime.